In the spring of 1995, on a small farm in Puerto Rico, a man walks out at first light and finds his animals dead. Not torn apart, not carried off, just dead. A couple of neat puncture marks on the neck, and, according to the stories that spread within hours, every drop of blood gone. Then it happened again, and again. Goats, chickens, rabbits. Across the island, animals dying in the dark, and no predator anyone could name. By that summer, Puerto Rico had a monster. They called it El Chupacabra, the goat sucker, and within a single year, it would leap across an ocean, change its shape, and become one of the most famous creatures on Earth. But here's what makes the Chupacabra different from almost everything else we've talked about around this fire. Most monsters are ancient. Their beginnings are buried under centuries of retelling. The Chupacabra is barely 30 years old, which means for once, we can watch a monster being born, trace it, almost to the day, and when you do, the truth turns out to be stranger than the legend, because the Chupacabra may have been created by accident, by a movie. Let's start with actually what happened, because something did happen. In 1995, farmers across Puerto Rico began reporting livestock killed in a strange way. The animals had puncture wounds, often 2 small holes, and people swore the bodies had been drained of blood, not mauled, not eaten, emptied. For a rural community, this was a nightmare with teeth. There were people's livelihoods dying in the night. And when something frightening happens and no one has an explanation, the human mind does what it has always done. It reaches for a shape to put on the fear. The name came quickly. El Chupacabra, the goat sucker, reportedly coined by a Puerto Rican comedian as the reports piled up. And the name stuck, because it was perfect. It told you exactly what to be afraid of before you'd even seen it. But a name isn't a face. For that, the Chupacabra needed a witness. And in August of 1995, it got one. Her name was Madeline Tolentino, and she lived in the town of Canovanas. One afternoon, she said she saw a creature outside her window, and the description she gave would become the Chupacabra, the one you're picturing right now. She described a thing about 3 to 4 feet tall. It stood upright, on 2 legs. It had thin arms, long claws, and enormous dark eyes. Some tellings say they glowed red. And down its back ran a row of spines, or quills, that seemed to change color. It moved, she said, in a strange hopping motion, almost like a kangaroo. The image detonated. It spread through the island's newspapers and radio, then Spanish-language media across the Americas, and the spiny, red-eyed, upright creature became the definitive monster. Sketches, sightings, and stories all began to match Tolentino's account, because Tolentino's account was the template everyone was working from. And that's the moment a folklorist would flag, because when hundreds of independent sightings all describe the same, very specific creature, you have to ask a quiet question. Are people seeing the same monster, or the same description? Which brings us to a man who spent 5 years trying to answer exactly that. And what he found is the strangest part of this whole story. The investigator's name is Benjamin Radford, and he did something most people chasing monsters never do. He went back to the very first witness and looked at her life in detail in the year 1995, and he found something. In 1995, the same year as her sighting, a science fiction horror film called Species was released. Its monster, a creature called Syl, was designed by the artist H.R. Giger. And Syl has a very particular look. Humanoid, upright, dark eyes, thin frame, and a row of spines running down its back. Spines down the back. The one detail that made the Chupacabra the Chupacabra. When Radford looked closer, it got harder to explain away. By his account, Tolentino had seen Species around the time of her sighting, and she reportedly felt that the events in the movie were, in some way, really happening. Radford's conclusion wasn't that she lied. It's something stranger and more human. That a vivid film, a frightening summer, and a real string of dead animals braided together in memory, and a movie monster stepped out of the screen and into the Puerto Rican night. Now, is that the whole answer? Not necessarily. Memory is messy, and Radford's case is an argument, not a confession. But once you've seen Syl standing next to the classic Chupacabra, you can't unsee it. The most famous monster of the modern age may carry the fingerprints of a Hollywood special effects department. But if the spiny creature came from a movie, then what were people finding in the fields? Because a few years later, the bodies started showing up. Here's where the Chupacabra does something almost no other monster does. It changed shape. As the legend crossed into Mexico and then the southern United States, Texas especially, the creature stopped standing upright. It dropped onto 4 legs, it lost its spine, and it became a hairless, leathery, dog-like beast with a hunched back and a mouth full of fangs. The Texas Blue Dog. And unlike the Puerto Rican version, this Chupacabra left corpses. Ranchers shot strange hairless animals. People found dried, shriveling carcasses that looked like nothing they'd ever seen. Gray skin, sunken eyes, just wrong. So scientists did the obvious thing. They ran the DNA. And every single time the answer came back the same. Coyote, dog, sometimes raccoon, known animals suffering from a condition called sarcoptic mange. Mange is caused by a tiny mite that burrows into the skin. In a severe case, the animal loses all its hair. The skin thickens and hardens and turns grey and leathery, and the body shrinks and shrivels. A coyote with advanced mange doesn't look like a coyote anymore. It looks like a monster. Gaunt, hairless, fanged, and desperate enough to attack livestock it would normally never risk. So the American Chupacabra wasn't a new species. It was an old animal wearing a disease like a costume. But what about the thing that started it all? The blood. The animals drained dry. That's the part that feels genuinely supernatural. Here's the quieter truth. When veterinarians actually examined livestock said to be bloodless, they generally found the blood was still there, inside the animal. When a predator kills and the animal dies, blood stops circulating and pools and clots inside the body. Cut it open, and it can look like there's very little left, especially to someone who isn't a pathologist and is already terrified. The neat puncture wounds? Consistent with the canine teeth of a dog or coyote. The lack of a torn-apart carcass? Some predators kill more than they eat, especially when panicked or interrupted. None of that is as satisfying as a blood-drinking demon, but it's what the evidence keeps saying. The signature crime of the Chupacabra, the drained animal, may never have happened at all. It may have been a frightening scene, misread and repeated until it became fact. So if the spiny creature came from a film, and the corpses are mangy coyotes, and the drained blood is mostly a misunderstanding, why did the Chupacabra become huge? Because of when it was born. 1995 was the exact moment the internet was starting to connect ordinary people, and Spanish-language media spanned 2 continents. The Chupacabra is the first great monster of the media age. It didn't spread over centuries by firelight. It spread in months, fast enough to change shape as it traveled, from spiny biped in Puerto Rico to a hairless dog in Texas. And it landed on ground that was ready for it. Puerto Rico in the 1990s carried real anxieties, economic fear, and a deep distrust that showed up in one of the earliest Chupacabra rumors, that the creature was some escaped experiment from a secret government lab. The monster gave shape to things people already felt but couldn't point to. That's what the Chupacabra actually is, not a species, a mirror. It's proof that we never stopped making monsters. That folklore didn't die with the modern world. It just got faster. Give people a real fear, a frightening night, a vivid image from a screen, and a way to share it, and a monster will assemble itself out of all of it. We watched it happen. We can name the year. So no, there's probably no goat sucker out there in the dark, spines glinting, waiting. But the thing that made it is very real. And it's still working. It's in us. And it's never going to run out of material. The Chupacabra is only 30 years old, which means somewhere out there, right now, the next monster is already being born, in a frightening night, a half-seen shape of a story told too many times. We just haven't given it a name yet. If you want to be here when we do, subscribe and pull up a log. There's always another story waiting in the dark. We'll see you by the fire.